All right, how are we doing out there? Are we live? Is this everything working? Looks pretty good, sounds pretty good. Might turn the mic down a tiny bit and see how that goes. Cool, and I think it looks pretty good. Hopefully the new microphone sounds better than the old one. So I'm just gonna be hanging out until people show up. But I did just update all of my Fab Filter plugins, which I am very excited about, including Timeless 3, which I have not yet had a chance to play around with. So I'm probably going to make some noises with this and see how that goes until people show up. All right, let's do something like collision. All right, so we got delays there, delay taps here. And I guess you can control those. We got drive control, lo-fi, diffusion, I guess a reverb, dynamics, and some pitch controls. Right, ducking, instability, some other modulators. Cool. And this is delay times, and this is delay pannings. Freeze it. I'm gonna tape delay, feedback control, and we got a built-in filter here. Got a lot of stuff going on. EQ. Hey, antenna, how's it going? That's pretty cool. The lo-fi sounds like. Sounds pretty lo-fi. A little bit of diffusion. Ooh, I like that a lot. Almost sounds like a reverse. I'm doing pretty well myself. I just got my new microphone hopefully all set up and running, and hopefully it sounds good. And I also just updated my Fab Filter plugin, so I'm playing around with the Timeless 3, which I played with a much older version of Timeless, so they've changed a lot since last I used it. I'm only been using it for about 2 minutes, and I'm digging it so far. Dynamics and then pitch control. That's cool. So you can do some like little pitchy things. That's pretty sweet. And then we got delay time. And we got delay pan left and right. So you do some cool ping pongy kind of sounds. Okay, so if you go one direction, it changes the right side. Change the left side, and go the other direction, change to the right side, which is kind of weird. I wish there was 2 separate knobs for that. Still sounds cool though. Now we got some built-in ducking. Yeah, so if you are a student, Antone, you can get a 50% discount, student or teacher. So I don't know if you are involved in education anywhere, but that's what I did to get all of my Fab Filter stuff. I got the full FX package, so I got all of it except for a couple, like 3 or 4 of them. I'm assuming instability is like a randomness control. Yeah, it's like a random modulator. It's cool. I'm liking this so far. Then we got ducking, which just can side chains it to the incoming signal. My guess is if you just finished university last month and you still have a student ID, you can. It's very highly likely you can qualify for the 50% student discount. Most plugin companies I found, if they do some kind of educational discount, they're pretty cool with it. As long as you are like a student somewhere and are like just somewhat involved in education, then they're pretty cool with it. So I think it's worth a try. And then what else we got here? We got feedback here, and then we got feedback panning. Turn this back down. So we got positive and negative there. Tape versus stretch. Oh, we got sync timing is in here. We got freeze control. I don't know what this does. Oh, we got ping pong modes. Get this up. Oh, nice. Like one of the like old sample library sample CDs where you just like you have to put in the CD and then grab all the samples from it. What kind of samples are there? Are they like electronic music samples or are they just random samples? Oops. More of this diffusion going on in here. This sounds pretty great. It's a little, I feel like there's a little overly complicated in terms of like all the stuff that's in here, but sounds really good. We can get per channel EQs. That's kind of cool. We got a wobble, we got a random, we got an envelope. Just do an XLFO. Put that on, I don't know, our delay time. Control. All that kind of stuff. It's kind of weird how they have like these little color indicators here, kind of showing you what's going on with your modulators. Like if you have an envelope, and I apply that to that, you get like little bits of color happen. Let me turn this off. Let me put this on, I don't know, our feedback. I'm trying to figure out a situation where I might use this over something like Echo. I feel like Echo is going to get me a lot of really similar similar settings, but it feels a little easier to use. Although randomizing the taps sounds cool. That's really cool. I like that feature a lot. Nice. That sounds dope. Getting some of those old samples, some of them can be really cool, especially if you're going to go for that kind of like classic old school kind of sound. Ramp up. All right, this is the reason to use this, I think. Built-in taps control. And can you manually, okay, so you can manually drag them around. Turn this down. That's pretty awesome. And, oh, you can just double click and add them, and then can you assign them aside? You select multiple ones. Ah, this is super cool. Yeah, being able to individually control as well as having individual built-in presets for your delays is really cool, where you can control volume uh, and panning. How do I control the panning manually? You can add in your own ones. Pretty sweet. You can have like preset built-in randomized delays. Many. Space evenly. Yeah, this little drop down menu here is my favorite part about this. Yeah, this is something I've not seen on any other delay. I think is really interesting. Shifted. Yeah, they can like dynamically respond, which seems kind of cool. Only lets me select some of them. How do I zoom in and out of here? Only let me see the first couple. Did they just repeat? No. All right, I need to figure out a little bit more about how this is working. Like, what is the difference between these two views? How do I pan them? There's definitely some questions. Yeah, stream is giving me some errors here. Give me a moment to figure out what's going on. What is causing that? It's probably my internet just being weird. Let me see what I can do here. All right, hopefully that fixes some of the buffering issues. I'm gonna give stream a second to catch up. All right, checking, test 1, 2. It's still working. All right, hopefully that's a little better. YouTube's telling me it's okay. Maybe. Nope, no, it's not. I apologize to anybody who's out there. I'm still getting stream error messages. Yeah, it's given me some error messages here. And I'm trying to figure out what's causing the issues. And Zach, welcome. How's it going for you? Hopefully you're doing all right. All right, looks like it's maybe catching up a little bit, hopefully. I could turn down, oh, it's giving me the green light. I didn't do anything, I didn't change anything, but it looks like it's doing better now. All right, hopefully that's it. It's just my internet just being weird. Let me know out there if it's, oh no, it's giving me the error message again. Well, if you guys are out there and it's not buffering too bad, feel free to toss any questions you have in the chat. And I'm going to try to figure this out and see if there's anything I can do to make this a little easier. I might change the resolution real quick and see if that helps. Yeah, Zach, it looks like it's kind of going in and out. It is unusual. All right, let me try changing one thing. I will be back in just a moment. I think this. All right, so I changed the resolution. Should be back now. Hopefully, it'll look worse now, but it shouldn't have the buffering issue. But let me know if on your end it looks good. And if you just joined us, welcome. I'm just trying to figure out how to make this whole situation work. That's right. Like when you are making music and just kind of dealing with technology, there's a certain amount of like just things going wrong that you kind of have to just figure out and deal with along the way. And then with streaming, it's the same thing, but there's like no information about what's going wrong at any point. Like if something goes wrong when I'm making music, in terms of technology, I can Google it, I can look up forums, I can like do some research and figure it out. When I'm streaming, it's like number one, it's live, so I've got to like figure it out on the fly. And number two, there's like no information about what's specifically causing my issue that day, and it's something different every single stream. So it's been a bit of a learning curve, but Zach, I'm glad you're still here, and the stream is hopefully working a little better now. Yeah, it's gonna be at 7:20 for right now. and it seems to be working well for a while. I might switch it back to 1020 or 1080. Cool. So I was just playing around with Timeless, but I am just gonna be hanging out, and you guys are more than welcome to ask questions about anything you may have questions about. Other than that, it's just gonna be all just weird delay collision sounds. And I do really want to figure out how this stuff works if you have it on like eighth notes. So those are in between the eighth notes. Yeah, this is a delay by a company called FabFilter called Timeless. That Time has been around for a long time, but the third version was released sometime fairly recently. So I just updated and I'm testing it out, and it's pretty crazy in terms of what it can do. It's got a lot of your kind of like classic delay features with some other like built-in effects, but I'm really want to learn more about these taps, which you can like go in and you can like edit individual taps within your delay line in terms of like volume and timing, as well as panning as well. But I haven't read the manual or I haven't done anything with this yet. I'm mostly just kind of screwing around with it to see what happens, which is probably one of the best ways to learn different instruments or effects. So something like that. It's on eighth notes and it's doing all in between those. If I slow this down, I think that's pretty wacky. Ping pong is still on. How do I zoom in over here? That's what I want to know. Am I missing something? Oh, there you go. So I can change them like that. So these just repeat. Okay, that's what's happening. So this is a set amount of time, and then it repeats them. And because I'm on ping pong mode, it's bouncing back and forth automatically. So it only lets me zoom in on the one, and then it bounces back and forth. If I go like that, that makes more sense. So now if I zoom in here, you can see these are all the little taps, and kind of a crazy, weird, uneven. Cool. And then we can go in here and now we can space evenly. We can randomize the timings. It's kind of cool. I don't mind that. This is starting to make a lot more sense, and trying to imagine a situation where I really would need this level of control of delays, but like that sounds pretty awesome, I think. We got straight, we got dotted. I like it when they're slower. Actually, return this back to. All right, let's reinitialize. Okay. Now each one of those is a tap. We put it on quarter notes. We got all that space in there. And now we can go in here, because these are all evenly spaced. So if I move them here, the same thing is moving here. Okay. This is making sense. So now they're quarter notes. And if I add in a new one, I have to click on this. And that puts a little one in between halfway between. This is the volume control, so I can have different taps at different volumes. If I zoom back out here, those will just repeat. So the amount of time here is basically like a cycle. And if I were to one here, can't make these any louder. And the decay here is controlled by the feedback. If I change these, changes those, but for some reason not the second one. Interesting. And then I can randomize, I can do a ramp up, which just takes that same thing. Like horse galloping kind of thing. Kind of cool. We can space immediately. They're already spaced even more or less. Ramp up, ramp down, randomize. This will randomize the timings of the ones that are already there, if I'm not mistaken. No, this randomizes and adds new ones in there. It's too many. I need to, but it does let you control the timings there. We can turn on and off individually. We can't control them there. All right, and then let's turn on the reverb. Not really a reverb, it's just like a diffusion, which makes it sound like a reverb. That's fairly pretty if I pitch it up. Inside feedback, outside feedback. That's pretty cool. Up this drive guy a little bit. All right, let's toss on a little arpeggiator, see what happens. All right, and let's make this a little less decay. That sounds kind of cool. All right, so we want to evenly space these. Timing is still too fast. And I want to ramp up. Delete that one, delete that one, delete that one. Pitch stuff's a little too much, I think. Too much feedback. We got feedback panning, we got a mix percentage, we got a wet percentage, we got width control, we got stereo control, stereo and mono buttons, crossfade from feedback. All right, let's space them evenly again and back to default. Back at 100%. And let's so the mix percentage is a volume that's independent of the wet level. So just a dry signal versus wet signal here. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff you can do with this. Many taps. That's my biggest issue here. I want more controls with the taps, and I want to be able to randomize them without them going crazy all the time and having like a faster delay time. That's my big issue so far. Randomize it again. Too much. It just like adds like a million taps in here, and I only wanted to add like 3 of them randomly. Going back to unsynced, slow it way down. A little too, a little filter action here. Much better. Let's not use this as that. Get a little shelf. I'm kind of feeling that could work. Hey Emo, how's it going? Everything's feeling pretty gravy right now. I had a little issue with my internet connection earlier, but I think I got it all sorted. I had to reduce the stream quality down to a paltry 720, so the probably doesn't look as good as it normally does, but Other than that, I'm doing pretty good. Playing around with some weird delay action. The new Fat Filter Timeless 3, which I'm digging quite a bit. Although I am going to turn the diffusion off. And I'm going to randomize it one more time. Give me less randomization. That's my biggest issue here. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. And then I also want to try out the other one I haven't really played around with a lot, which is Pro R, which is the Fab Filter or Reverb. I honestly haven't really used. It does have a very cool looking interface and a lot of interesting looking knobs. I think all of the Fab Filter plugins are just really pretty. Like, I think that when it comes to plugin design and making something that's both functional but also you want to use it, making sure that like all the colors and shapes and everything looks nice is a big deal for me. So just by looking at this, I already tell like turn this off, or push it off. Got this cool, very like psychedelic motion of the harmonics there. All right, so let's take a look at what we got going on here. Like again, I haven't played with this a lot, so I will be learning it along with you guys. So we got a space here with timing. Just basically a diffusion tail time. We got brightness. Not doing a whole lot for us quite yet. And the dry went down a tiny bit. Get started with, we got decay rate, which affects our space timing. So this is not only the amount of time, but it's also the shape of the space, which is kind of interesting. Cool, so you kind of use the two together. And this has a little EQ here. We got one EQ here. We got decay rate EQ on one. And we have just, I'm assuming, just a regular EQ over here, which I want to be like low cut. If I do this, does that mean I get more decay time on this frequency? That's kind of what it sounds like. That's kind of cool. Yeah, they just know how to like make it look like sleek and efficient and also look at like also functional at the same time, which is hard. Sometimes you get the plugins that look really nice, but they don't sound that great or that cool. And then sometimes you get plugins that are sound amazing, but are a massive pain to use and don't look interesting or pretty at all. So if I want to use that, the command drag it, you can kind of change the shape there. Cool, so that's interesting. It's like a EQ that controls the amount of decay time for those frequencies, which is really fascinating, which is gets you some cool, interesting results depending on how you have it set up. Let's move this here. You get more decay time there or less decay time there without affecting any of the frequencies. I'm digging that so far. We got space control, we have distance. So just how close you are. Very nice. And then we got character and brightness. So character, more clean over here. Let's dial this back a little bit. Dial this back a little bit. Cool. Those are all pretty normal reverb controls from the most part, from what it looks like. There's no, from what I'm seeing now, unless I'm missing something. Oh, there's pre-delay. That's what I was looking for. We got a little pre-delay here. We got the analyzer controls. We got the input-output controls. Interesting. I was expecting a few more weird settings in here. But I think it sounds really good. We put it with the little timeless. Probably too much decay time. Or do that and that. Get back to our delay. Ramp these up. These can be really quiet, it feels like. I mean, that's a very like clean atmospheric kind of reverb. Like, that sounds pretty good, I feel like. If you're going for that kind of airy kind of sound. I go over here. This not one knob does a lot. Does a lot of work, I feel like. Hey Chuck, how you doing this afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are? Right, let me turn this guy back off. This actually sounds really good down here. Like, that's a very like clean, responsive reverb. I'm not hearing these knobs a whole lot yet. Maybe I need to crank some more settings to make them really noticeable. You get a little bit of difference there. Yeah, so I just updated all of my FabFilter plugins. So I'm playing around with mostly the ones that I have no idea about. So I was playing around with Timeless a little bit earlier. This was just like a lot of new stuff for me. I played with like much older versions of Timeless, but they've updated it with a bunch of new cool stuff that I'm pretty into. And then I've never owned Pro R before. So I was super curious to see what this sounds like compared to a lot of other reverbs, because I'm kind of just obsessed with reverbs. And I like it so far. I think if I'm going for like a clean, subtle reverb sound, I think this could be great. I was kind of expecting a few more weirder options, and maybe they're just kind of like hidden somewhere and I haven't found them yet. Something more along the lines of what you can get in a lot of the like Valhalla reverbs. But I do think that this like sounds really good. And I do like that the space control and the decay control you can kind of use in tandem to get the right amount of reverb to make it like just perfect, which I think is a really interesting choice. And I think this is probably my favorite part, besides the EQ for decay time, which is also just like a crazy concept. But yeah, I'm mostly just kind of exploring these because I've never really played around with them. But I'm in no way just attached to doing FabFilter today. If you guys have other topics or things you want to be talking about, I am here for whatever you got. I do want to play with some of the presets here, see if there's anything kind of strange that they come up with. Kind of test the black hole. sounds pretty good. A lot of EQing stuff. You can have multiple bands for the decay rates. Cool. Hey Chapati, how you doing? Hey Jonathan, how's it going? I used to stream on Twitch and that went decently well, but now that I'm releasing a lot of videos and stuff on YouTube, I tend to be more YouTube focused. I still have my Twitch account, and at some point, once I feel super confident with the stream situation and YouTube, I might try dual streaming on both, but that seems like a lot of work. So we'll see if I ever go back to Twitch. But for right now, not really stream on Twitch, but there is a Twitch account for Catalyze. Chuck, are you asking about how to make a wall of reverb using Ableton reverbs? Or are you just in general talking about the concept of wall reverb and how people are using it? Yeah, I'm not planning on moving from YouTube. I think the idea would be that I would like have one stream and would stream on Twitch and YouTube at the same time, which I know people have done that. But I think my streaming setup is complicated enough as it is, and that just seems like a whole new level of complication that I'm not willing to dive into quite yet until once I get everything feeling super comfortable. Yeah, so if you wanted to do like a big heavy reverb sound, it depends on which reverb you want to use, because there's three real options. You have the live, just the generic live reverb, which I think is, oh man, I've got mixed feelings about just the generic live reverb. I think the live reverb very much sounds okay. I think you can get decent sounds out of it if you know what settings you're looking for, but it takes a little bit, and like you can make things sound decent, but you have to tweak things a little bit. Whereas I think if you're using something like the convolution reverb, the reverb ducking, Chuck, you're talking about in hybrid? Well, let me switch over to convolution real quick. So convolution reverb, I think, just straight up sounds better pretty much all the time. Sounds a little cleaner, sounds a little crisper. It just sounds more real. The big issue with the convolution reverb is primarily that it starts off way too large. And so anytime you play anything through convolution reverb, you get these big, long reverby sounds, which is great, but you pretty much always need to take this decay time and just crank the decay way down, almost to like 10% in a lot of cases, just to get something that feels a little bit like cleaner. Yeah, I love side chaining, using reverbs from my return tracks and then side chaining it, and then not side chaining the original track. I think it's a great way to add a nice bit of pulsing motion, add a little bit of movement to your reverb that otherwise wouldn't be there. But if you are going for a big kind of wall of sound reverb, I think convolution reverb is a great choice. All you really need to do is just like pick a big, huge sounding reverb space that you think sounds really cool. That is a very small one. Let's pick like the Sports Center. Sounds really clean. You know, like you barely need to do anything with convolution. And this is one of the things I think is really important when it comes to choosing the right tool for the right job, in terms of like plugins versus stock effects, or, you know, Pro Q versus EQ8 or Pro R versus the live reverb. A lot of times when I'm looking for an effect, I want it to sound a very specific way, and I don't want to have to do a lot of work to make it sound that way. And convolution reverb is one of those devices where it's like 5 mouse clicks and you have something that sounds pretty good really consistently. And I think if you can, like, in under 10 mouse clicks, make something sound the way you want, then that's the sign of a really solid plugin or device or just effect in general. So convolution reverb is excellent for something like that. However, the hybrid reverb, I think, really kind of just builds on top of whatever convolution reverb can do, just because it has just the built-in convolution settings right here. However, if I'm playing with hybrid reverb, almost guaranteed it's going to be more than 10 clicks of my mouse to get the sound that I want, because it has so many settings and it has so many features and so many things built into it that I always want to tweak them all and play around with all of them. So I think that when you're choosing an effect, sometimes less is more in terms of like features and things like that. So a lot of times I'll go convolution reverb over hybrid reverb because I'm like, okay, quick, easy, there it is. Whereas hybrid, I really have to like get in here, and there's a lot of great settings in here. I think they sound really good, but like, there's so much you can do with it that you're always tempted to like continually tweak knobs forever until you get something you want. But a lot of times, if you're going for, we're talking about like the wall of reverb, which is fantastic for a lot of the music I do. I like making kind of like open, ambient, spacey, sci-fi, kind of trippy, soundscapey kind of things. And reverb is just amazing for that kind of thing. Especially if you just like totally drown out your sound with reverb just by like cranking the dry wet. And let's give this more pre-delay. And where's my, this little bit of attack. Got plenty of decay in here. Let's find a really big one. Large rooms. And then if you crank up the decay time, you can just basically use this. Oops, that's a little feedbacky. You can use this like its own like sound generation sources. It almost doesn't matter what you put into it. Let's EQ some of that out. There's like one. And then you can like compress that, you can sidechain that, you can like have a delay either before or after and just kind of use it as like its own kind of sound generation source. And this is a fantastic way just to get cool background sounds or like intros or outros for your track. Just take something you're already using in your track. So if you're using something like that as your melody, run it through something like this, resample that. Let's go up, calls. And then use this as like its own kind of sound source. And it gets you something that relates to what you already have going on. And then you can kind of layer it in the background a little bit. And then of course sidechain it, and you get this nice kind of like pulsing atmospheric kind of thing. But that's if you're like really going over the top with it. I think a lot of times in situations where you are not going for that kind of like a big wall of reverb or that big kind of like huge sound area, keep the dry wet down. Getting the right amount of dry wet can be really vital. So a lot of times if I'm using like a reverb as an insert instead of a return track, I'm going to keep my dry wet at like 20 to 30%, and then like really got to watch out with that decay time. Hey son, thanks for passing by and stopping in. Appreciate it. But one of the biggest struggles of my entire career as a music producer is I always want to go too heavy on the reverbs, and sometimes if you overdo it on the reverbs, it'll just ruin your day when you're mixing. So part of growing up as an adult and as a producer is learning when I can get away with going really heavy on the reverbs, and when am I better off not going really heavy on reverbs and kind of choosing my battles in as opposed to just like always going over the top with it. So Emo is asking, would I group the reverb signal and volume it from the group? So are you talking about when having reverb track not be a sense? So yeah, if I'm using a reverb as an insert effect, so it's just on the track itself, not as a return track, um, yeah, I'll run that through the group. Um, because if I'm using it as an insert, I'm kind of considering the reverb as part of the sound. Oftentimes, when I'm using a reverb as a return track, it's like I have my original sound and I have my reverb sound, and I want to be able to control them individually. One of the cool things that people don't really realize about the new hybrid reverb is, in addition to having the dry wet control over here, where it just acts like a normal dry wet, there's also a send knob right here. So you can control the volume going into the hybrid reverb. Let me turn this down. Which effectively allows me to uh, control the amount of reverb I'm getting from the in point as opposed to the point when it's coming out. So between these two controls, it makes it much easier to use a reverb as an insert effect as opposed to as a return track, which I thought was a really cool design choice. I don't see a lot of reverbs that do something like this. Yeah, I used to like not really screw around with pre-delay a whole lot, and now I use it a lot more. It does really make a difference, especially kind of going back to what Jonathan was mentioning about mixing and reverbs. Uh, a lot of times the reverb will get in the way of the actual sound you want to be hearing, which obviously you can control with things like dry wet. And again, being really discerning about the exact amount of dry wet on your reverb is absolutely crucial to making mixing reverbs doable. Um, in my opinion, reverbs, you want to be able to hear the reverb, but you don't want people to notice it. The second people notice the reverb more than they notice the original sound, the source sound, it gets in the way and it becomes distracting. So oftentimes you can get away with having a much lower dry wet on a reverb than you initially realize. And it's still audible, it's still there in the mix, but it's like a background or supporting sound or a supporting part of the actual main sound. So yeah, so if you're running into issues with mixing and reverbs, dry wets are really, really important. But if you're using hybrid reverb, also try using the send knob because that also really helps. Also, EQs. This is one of the reasons it's really, really helpful to have a reverb on your return track. So if instead of using this guy, I'm using my return A, which is just my reverb, which I don't think you guys can see because it's behind my head. Running an EQ8 immediately after it is really, really helpful because a lot of times with these reverbs, they're just adding lots and lots of frequencies, which in a lot of cases is good. That's what you want, but obviously you want to like get rid of any unwanted low end, or if there's any resonant reverb frequencies, you can like tone those down individually, and that'll make your life a lot easier when you're mixing. So another really, really helpful part of having your reverbs on return tracks is you can like EQ them separately from everything else. And then, I mean, theoretically, you could do that here. You had something like this. You could put this in a rack and then EQ this separately. And then on your chains, you could right click here, hit create chain. And this is just an empty dry chain. And so that way you have one chain that is fully wet. And then you can use this volume control here like a send knob. So you're basically turning this into a send and return inside of your track as like a insert effect. So you could EQ that here separately from your other sound, but I find oftentimes it's a lot easier just to have a dedicated return track. Yeah, Jonathan, throwing a little saturator after the EQ, I think works really well, or a compressor. A lot of times my go-to kind of reverb chain is reverb first, then an EQ, and then a little bit of compression or saturation or something like that to help kind of boost up a little bit. And then sometimes also a side chain on it. But Tripathi was asking about, can I explain the difference between dry wet on a reverb on a channel versus the amount on send on the, I'm assuming the send knob on a reverb to go into the return track. So yeah, so this is a really interesting experiment to try out here. If we just grab like a snare sound, snares and reverbs are really, really, they go together. So it's really important that your reverb on your snare sounds good. Let's just go to my snare folder. All right, we'll take something like this. Oops, I put that way up there. Okay. If I have a snare sound and I put a reverb on it, I'm just gonna use the generic reverb for something like this. When you're dealing with a time-based effect, your dry wet knob is not just the amount of the effect, it's the volume of your dry signal versus the volume of your original signal. Or sorry, dry signal versus the volume of your delayed signal or your reverb signal. So at 0%, oops, we're not hearing any reverb, right? And at 100%, we're only hearing reverb. We're not hearing anything. And at 50%, that means the reverb and the snare are the same volume. And obviously, if I'm like 20%, the snare will be louder than the reverb. And at 75%, the reverb will be louder than the snare. So it's controlling the volume, which means naturally, as the dry wet goes up, we are going to be losing volume on our snare sound. And you can actually see the volume here, like it's at like -24 right now, versus at like -12 there. So on time-based effects, meaning reverbs and delays, dry wet is not just the amount of the effect, it's the volume of the original signal versus the volume of the delayed signal, which is especially important in a situation like this where I want to maintain the volume of my snare, but I also want to give it a bit of that tail. Whereas if you're using a return track, your dry wet is going to be at 100% because if you send some signal here and say your dry wet is at 50% of the signal coming out of your return track is just your original signal. It doesn't help you a lot. So effectively what this means is if I use this as my send knob like a dry wet, on an insert effect, my dry signal is here, my wet signal is here. As one goes down, the other goes up. In this situation, if my dry signal is here, my wet signal is here, if I turn up a return track, it just goes up. So my dry signal always stays the exact same volume, and then my wet signal is fully customizable. Whereas if it's an insert effect, it's like one goes up and the other goes down automatically. So that's the main difference between using a send knob for your dry wet versus using an insert effect and a dry wet control. It's subtle, but it's really, really important, especially on something like drums. All right, gotta catch up on chat here a little bit. So Jonathan, as far as different reverbs go and getting them all to sit in the mix together without clashing, that can be super tricky. And I think that part of it kind of comes down to limiting yourself and kind of limiting your options. If you're using like 5 or 6 different reverbs, try toning it down to like 2 or 3. My kind of generic setup that I go for when it comes to uh, like my production template is I have one just kind of generic, nice, realistic sounding reverb, which is usually either convolution reverb or it is Valhalla vintage verb. Those are kind of my two like nice, realistic sounding reverbs. And then I have one really weird kind of spacey reverb, which is usually Valhalla shimmer or sometimes hybrid reverb, or my kind of like atmospheric kind of stuff. And then I have one reverb that is dedicated just for my snare or for my clap. And those are kind of like my three go-to reverb channels. And that way, if I need reverb anything, I can just run it through any one of those three. And there still might be some clashing there. There still might be a little bit of like massaging I might need to do to make them all work together. Uh, However, it's a lot easier than having like 5 or 6 where it's like different settings on everything and different EQs on everything and trying to make them all work together. Because reverb's just like, because because they're time based, every time you run something through it, it's like it lasts for a long time, which means you get a lot of like residual frequencies and just stuff that gets left over in your mix that doesn't always need to be there. So reduce the number of reverbs you have, and then also potentially reduce the decay time on those reverbs. And that can be really helpful to prevent things from, again, like extending out for 2, 3, 4 seconds. And that way you can have like, one reverb will fade out before then you hear the reverb on the next sound that kind of comes in. I think the big issue is when you have a lot of long reverbs and you run a couple sounds through them, they're all just like resonating together and kind of stewing together, which is taking away attention from the important sounds in your song. And then another option you have is to sidechain them. A lot of times I will be sidechaining my reverbs to things like the kick or sometimes the snare even, or potentially like things like vocals, things that I want to be really clear and real present. Just put a little sidechain on, put it on your return track. That's why return tracks are so handy. And you can even, you could sidechain your reverb to both the kick and the vocals on separate compressors on one return track. And that way, every time the kick comes in, it cuts through the reverb a little bit. And then if you have a vocalist or like your main melody part that you want to sit on top of the reverb a little bit more, that can also have like a little subtle bit of ducking on the reverb, and that can help out a lot. But really make sure you dial in your decay times and your dry wets, of course, and then don't be afraid to EQ them pretty heavily. Also, just kind of while we're talking about reverbs and decay times, like I mentioned, reverbs and snares go hand in hand. And if your decay time is too long, like when you hear this sound, when I hear that, that doesn't just sound like I'm hearing the reverb more than I'm hearing the snare, and it's distracting from the snare. So if you get your decay time just right, it can be subtly there, where you can hear it, but it doesn't envelop the sound. It doesn't become the sound. So a lot of times I've found with something like a snare or a clap, having a decay time of somewhere between like 600 milliseconds to about 1.2 seconds is kind of the sweet spot usually. That might vary a little bit depending on what genre of music you're making and some stylistic choices you might want to make. But that's usually kind of the sweet spot in most situations. If it's less than 600 milliseconds, you go to like 500 milliseconds, 400 milliseconds. You just don't really notice it very much. It's like too subtle. There a little bit, but it's not doing much for you. And then if you go above 1.2 seconds, that's all you hear because it just like it resonates for so long. But stylistically, it might change a little bit. If you're making like, old school dub music, you can go super heavy on it and it sounds great. But watch out for that when you are doing your drum production, especially with, again, combining snares and reverbs together. And I pretty much always recommend, if you're going to be putting reverb on your snare, put it on a return track and give it its own individual return track. Like Live starts with 2 return tracks, but you can make up to 12 of them. Just Option Command T. So have a dedicated return track for just your snare or your clap or your snap or whatever sound you're using. And those channels get sent to it, and that way you can dial that reverb in just perfectly for just that one sound. Well, I like that we're diving deep into reverb stuff. I appreciate you guys having all these questions, keeping me on my toes. So Ema, I've never really I have looked into like BPM timing calculations, uh, but I've never really like made any decision like decay time decisions off of uh, BPM. I'll try it next time I'm writing a track. I'll specifically try to see how long the decay time is for in timing and see. I usually just kind of use my ear and kind of figure it out. Sweet. Any other questions, reverb or otherwise? Yeah, I can see that. I feel like in especially in some styles of techno, you can get away with putting reverb on some of your more kind of like low frequency sounds, and so in that case, I think it would be super important that that wasn't clashing with other sounds. Um, yeah, that makes sense. It's also a much higher tempo than I'm normally working at. I'm usually working at like 80, 90, 100 BPM. So I got a little bit more time in between big hits. All right, let's get rid of some of these guys. So getting into the Pro R, back into Pro R here. Let's so this does have this nice kind of like cleaner, more kind of realistic sound to it. Even just kind of going through some of these presets. Like I would probably add this to the Valhalla vintage verb / convolution reverb, like nice kind of clean sounding reverbs. I was expecting to get some more kind of like weirder ones out of this. Yeah, beautifully transparent is definitely kind of the two words I would use to describe pretty much everything that they do. Got some snare ones. I'll have to try this with the snare so it actually makes sense. Hey man, get that student discount. Way to do it. That's all right, I guess. That's pretty good. It's always good to check out the snare presets in any reverb because you never know if they're going to be amazing. Like, don't like that one at all, but there you have this your like super huge echoey one. Yeah, I'm digging it. I like it. Yeah, I'll definitely add this to the rotation of reverbs. Cool. What else you guys got for me as far as questions go? How's everybody's tracks coming along? Everybody working on something cool, something new, something interesting, something to share for the Friday feedback stream? All right, so let's get back in here. Let's turn on the timeless again. There's too much reverb. That's pretty good. So, Jonathan, are you just mixing hip hop, or are you producing it and mixing it, or are you just mixing stuff for other people? Which sounds pretty good. You know, too many low frequencies though. Let's get rid of that. And I see emo arrangements can be really tricky. I'm thinking about doing like a workshop, like an online workshop, sometime in the very near future, probably maybe even later this month, on just like arrangements and arrangement techniques and things to consider when you're arranging. Because I don't think it gets talked about enough, and I think it's something that it's probably I have more than I can say in just a little video about it. Yeah, taking some ideas and then turning them into a narrative or a story or like an actual like a journey you can take your listener on is it's a tricky thing to do. So Jonathan, they just hand you like a beat and a vocal, and you gotta mix them and try to make it sound good. It seems not. It seems like actually like harder than it probably sounds. Just mixing a beat and a vocal. Like it sounds like a lot of work for making it sound marginally better. Well, yeah, it's something I was taking my dog on a walk earlier today, and I was thinking about like upcoming workshops and things I can do. So I'll think about when that can be. Probably like a Saturday, a couple weeks from now, maybe towards the end of the month. Yeah, maybe like the 29th of this month or the 5th of next month. Yeah, a lot of times when you're like mixing just a couple stems, it's so much harder than when they give you like 30, 40, 50, 60 stems to work with. Because you can only do so much to those two things, and you really got to like use all the tricks and techniques just to like make it work. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're like almost mastering at that point. Do you just have a lot of like connections with producers, and they just hand you tracks to mix for them? And do you master them as well, or are you just doing the mixing stuff and then you send it off to somebody else to master? Yeah, you just have some rappers who they just download a beat online and then rap over it, and then you got to mix it. A lot of resonant frequencies somewhere. Come from Timeless. That is too much feedback. Try like some small rooms. Nice. Yeah. I mean, I think mixing and mastering is probably one of the best ways to be making money in the music industry right now. Like, people are not paying for music. There's no shows to be played, but people will pay to get their tracks mixed and mastered. So if that's a skill set you have and that's something you enjoy doing, it's a fantastic way to support yourself in the music world. That's something I tell a lot of my students, especially when I'm talking to my students about mixing and mastering, like, or just kind of like jobs in the music industry and kind of the directions the industry is headed. Uh, it's a great skill set to have in your pocket. Yeah, getting this translated to Spotify can be a pain, and it's not just getting things to translate to Spotify, but it's getting one mix and master to translate well to all of the various streaming services. Like, getting it sound good on one is that's not too hard, but it's getting it to sound good on Apple Music and SoundCloud and YouTube and all the other places people are consuming music. Make it sound good on all of those. Nightmare. Um, yeah, I'm glad I'm not mastering professionally right now. There's there's like all the technology keeps changing all the time, and there's no like consistency whatsoever in terms of like what the different streaming services are looking for and what they're trying to do. All right. I feel like I kind of got those two figured out for the most part. Any other ones I haven't played around with? Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of the smart move is like just try to make it sound good on Spotify, and if it sounds good on Spotify, then it'll probably sound okay on other things. But uh, I know some people who have like different masters for different streaming services. Yeah, it's crazy that there's like there has to be specialized tools that companies have to make just to make your song sound good on the streaming services that everybody uses. Um, yeah, all the LUFS stuff. Yeah, there's a bunch of like LUFS meters. I wish Ableton had a built-in anything that could just output what your LUFS are. Didn't have to use plugins for that. That'd be super handy. Even if on like the utility or something had a little feature where just like a little LUFS monitor would be amazing. Everybody I know who does like mastering is stressed out all the time by all that stuff. Sweet. Well, anybody else out there got any questions or topics that they want to discuss, things they want to get into? Appreciate everybody who has stopped by thus far. Yeah, a lot of the streaming stuff though is like those companies have had years now to kind of get their act together and come to some sort of like cohesive decision about formatting and LUFs and all that stuff, just to make the lives easier on on the people making the music, so they don't need to stress out about it. What's up, Anton? Welcome back. Also, while you guys are here, I think I've seen some of you guys in the Discord channel. If you want to join that, that would be cool. Trying to get some stuff going on. I'm trying to get, hopefully in the near future, some like sample pack song challenge thing going on, where people can, I'll just put out a sample pack of a bunch of samples, and everybody has to go make a track with it, and then come back, and then for one of the like Friday song feedback streams, I'll take a listen to them, and we'll kind of go over them together. But I'm open to other ideas you guys have, like fun things that we can kind of do as a community or as a group, ways to support each other, ways to kind of like get more involved together. I'm super open to ideas. Yeah, I mean, the loudness wars with CDs. I mean, I think the loudness war is very much still going on. I don't think it's ended, and I think that we've just entered new frontiers in the loudness war. Uh, but I think that there's there was definitely a time, and I'm sure we're still in that time in a big way, where the people controlling the loudness were not the people making the music or the people mixing or mastering or producing the music, but it was the, you know, record label executives were the people who made those decisions. And I think that was definitely a bad move. And it seems like we moved a little bit away from that, just in the way that like record labels don't have the same kind of power that they used to, um, and just people can start making their own decisions about how loud or not loud they want their track to be. On the flip side of that, I know a lot of artists and producers who are taking this newfound freedom to push the loudness even harder, especially in like more aggressive styles of dance music like dubstep or something like that, where people are just like they're just cranking things through limiters. And if you know what you're doing, you can actually do that and make it sound decent. But a lot of people don't know what they're doing, and so it does not sound good. But there's a few artists out there who they figured out the magic secret formula for just crushing their dynamic range and still making it sound good. But the loudness war is very much still around. Yeah, Mr. Bill is a great example. There's a lot of people in the kind of like Disciple record label, like Virtual Riot kind of world. Those dudes just they just push it super hard. um, I actually I've seen Mr. Bill's mastering chain. His mastering is basically, I think it's just a limiter now. It might be one. I think it's one other plugin and then a limiter, and that's it. And he puts a lot more stress on the mixing side of things. So he makes sure his mix are really, really clean, and then is very minimal on the mastering side of things, and just kind of does the like the basics on the mastering, and it works for him, and it sounds great. His tracks sound dope. Yeah, and I've seen a few people who like they like just crank their track up to like, it's like clipping by like 14 decibels, and then they like somehow still make it sound good. Yeah, Mr. Bill used to live right down the street from me, and then he moved away, and then I moved away, and then I moved back, and now he doesn't live here anymore. Or I moved away first, and then he moved away right after, and then I came back. Yeah, it's something like a high pass and a limiter. It's like something like super basic like that, and just like spends all his time and effort and putting a lot of love into making sure those mixes are really solid, and then the master's just like you know runs it through, tweaks a couple settings, and then calls it a day. But I think some of the old ideas about technology and clipping have changed a lot now that everything's in like 32-bit. You can clip in 32-bit, and you can just turn it down later and it doesn't distort, which is kind of crazy. So I think there's a lot of like crazy things you can do now, you like taking advantage of 32-bit, and then as long as you kind of like fix it before you bounce it down to 24, you can get some like really loud sounds, and it still sounds pretty decent. But that's like a whole thing that like I'm only like probably not qualified to educate somebody else on. There's probably a lot more people who know how to like really push those limiters and do that kind of mastering on that really kind of heavy electronic music. Yeah, I like working with a lot of headroom when I'm producing, and then I'll just crank it things up on my speakers, and then usually I kind of start my mixes around negative 12 dB, and then by the time I'm done, up to negative 6 dB, and then get that last 6 decibels or so through the mastering process. A lot of times when I'm producing, I'll try to have like 12 to 18 decibels of headroom. Not all the time, but that's my goal usually. Yeah, and then just kind of naturally as I'm mixing, things kind of go from negative 12 to negative 6 or so. I haven't mastered anything in a while. I should probably finish up some more tracks and then get this mastered and get this out into the world. I think one of the primary benefits of starting this channel and doing like the streaming and things like this, it's starting to motivate me to finish up some more tracks and get things done and released and get them out there. I think I've been slacking recently. I've been too busy making videos and not making music. Yeah, I've been kind of lazy about my mastering chain. I've been using mostly the same mastering chain for a really long time, for the last couple of years. So I could also probably use a little update. Maybe get some of these new updated Fab Filter plugins, toss them into my mastering chain, replace a few effects with some Fab Filter stuff. Seems like a good idea. I'm using a lot of like Ozone, and my version of Ozone is like 3 or 4 versions old. Nice. So it sounds like you've been doing a bit of mastering and mixing and mastering emo. How long have you been making music for? I have not tried the Shadow Hill mastering compressors. Let's check those out. I get so many plugin recommendations from doing the streams. I can't I can't keep track of all the plugins and things people want to be using. All right. Oh, that's why it sounds to reverb. Because it reverb on the return. So I used Reason and Logic both before I ever used Live. Um, but I don't really stuck with them. Nice. That's awesome. Do you still spin with vinyl? Or do you, if you ever play out, do you go the digital route? Let me get that reverb back in here. Nice. That my vinyl collection is mostly like weird experimental music, so I can't DJ with it. But that's awesome. Can work. Nice. What was the first rave you ever went to? Nice. Yeah, DJ Shadow is probably one of if not the biggest influence of for me musically. Like I used to listen to in high school pretty much exclusively punk rock and DJ Shadow. Like that was like the one person outside of the punk rock world that I was like, this dude knows what's going on, and that really kind of opened the doorway for me for a lot of pretty much all the other electronic music I listened to. Nice. DJ Crush is awesome. I saw DJ Crush in Japan in like 2006 or so, and it was one of the best DJ sets I've ever seen. Like he was playing like unreleased remixes of all his own tracks, and like I don't even know how to explain it. I remember just walking out of that show being like amazed at what he was doing in this like little tiny club in Kyoto. And that was right around the time when I started making electronic music. Put this back down here. Tune this up an octave. Nice. I also saw Qbert when I lived in Japan. I saw a lot of good DJs when I lived in Japan. Nice. Yeah, last time I saw Shadow was probably like 6 years ago. It was him and I think Cut Chemist were going on tour with Africa Bambaata's record collection. Like he died and he donated his record collection to like the Harvard University archives or something. But before they put it in the archives, Crush and Cut Chemist, or not Crush, Shadow and Cut Chemist, like dug through all of it and they played a set that was like chronologically the history of like modern hip hop using the actual vinyl that Bambaataa would like sample and play with during his shows, and they had like a whole like visual thing to it. So it was like seeing almost like a thesis presentation where they're like talking about like, okay, like we're gonna start in like the 1930s, and like this percussive track that he sampled in like 1978 on this album, and kind of like where all this stuff came from, which was really cool. All right, what else can we do this guy? Get away from the beam. Let's try and remember. Sounds nice. All right. Yeah, I haven't listened to any of the like newer stuff DJ Shadow's been doing. I've seen some other people I like remixing him, but I haven't like listened to any stuff he's been releasing. I should probably check it out. But there was like that time period from like introducing Private Press, that whole era where he was just like everything he did was just amazing. So I could add a chord to that, playing a chord plucks, and then sidechain the plucks. So you mean like I could should I just do something like this? I could just add a chain here. And then sidechain that. You sidechain the arpeggiated part to the chord. Is that what what you want me to do? Because if so, delete this guy. I could probably just do that in an instrument rack where I have. Can I sidechain from one chain on a rack to another? I honestly have not tried. If I have two of these, one is arpeggiated because I'm already playing chords with the MIDI. Put the arpeggiator here, and then put the compressor on the arpeggiated side, and then sidechain that from self, and the other one why is it so much quieter now? Is that kind of what you meant, where I have this chain just being the chord? Sounds really a little better. So I could echo the chord. I'm not entirely sure if I'm understanding what you're saying. Cool, yes. And then I have the arpeggiator over here with the same collision, and then the compressor. Let's make it sound a little different though. All right, well now I gotta plug in a beat. Just go to beat tools. And then let's just make the first part better. I don't know if I like this drum kit or not. And we're gonna have to halftime this. It's like 187. Make this a little faster. I said a bunch of stuff while I was doing that. And what are the higher octave? Or an art before the delay in your scale. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by the scale. I'm not using a scale device or anything. I do have a delay. Do I not have the delay on here? I have the delay on the chord. So the chord is getting a delay. No, I was like gonna just play those in, but my timing kind of sucks. Oops. I have to do some faster ones, and they're gonna have to be really low velocity. And we'll do a couple here. Grab these guys. Super low velocity. I mean, I like what's going on here, and I did everything I did here. I did on your recommendation. Reverb's not doing it for me though. Then we got to get rid of that low end. And then we got to get a bass line in here. Monophonic, a little bit of glide, a little bit of unison. Take that. little slower attack on the bass. More glide. Yeah, we could make, just as an experiment, make this like a little pluckier thing instead of a, make that go to the filter frequency. One. Put the wrong one. Why is that not working? Envelope 2 should go to filter frequency. That's because I'm on the wrong track. That's actually, yeah, that's... Yeah, man, sometimes you just gotta jam it out. Actually, this is the first time I've had somebody be like, okay, now do this while I'm on stream. And it's actually kind of fun. So, so we'll have to do this more. We'll have to do like crowdsourced production where you guys just tell me what to do. Yeah, Tripathi, I will definitely do a vocal production thing. And worst case scenario, if I don't end up doing it on stream, I'll do like a little, quick tip video or something on some vocal processing stuff. I have not forgotten about that. All right, should be back. Hopefully it's working now. Sorry, my mic was doing the weird thing it does sometimes. But I think that's also my cue to head out for the evening. Big thanks to all you guys for showing up and having some awesome questions and topics for me to get into. This is definitely like something I really enjoy doing. So, and it wouldn't really be anything without you guys. So thanks for showing up today, or if you're watching the video later on, I appreciate it. I will be back on Friday for another song feedback stream. So if you guys want to, hey, Life of Ali, is it I or Ali? I can't see. My chat is too small. But yeah, thanks for popping by, and I'll be back on Friday for a song feedback stream. If you want to submit a song for the song feedback stream, you can do so early. If you join the Discord, there'll be a link in there, so you can guarantee that I listen to your song and you get some feedback on it. So again, yeah, thanks for everybody for showing up. Appreciate it, and I will see you on Friday, hopefully, or same time next week. So later.